a decorated prison warden, a manipulative inmate, a marriage quietly suffocating under the weight of secrets, and a twisted romance that would end in murder, scandal, and betrayal. This is a story of how one woman fell for the one man she was sworn to keep behind bars, and how it cost her everything. Welcome back to Mystery Crime Vaults. In today's case, we explored descent so shocking, it left a quiet Nebraska town stunned and a family in ruins. This isn't just a story of murder. It's about a respected figure in the criminal justice system who became entangled in the very web she once swore to control. It's about a dangerous obsession, fueled by power, seduction, and delusion, that spiraled into a chilling, calculated betrayal. As always, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss another story that's darker than fiction. Camille Drayton wasn't just respected. She was admired. She had spent over 2 decades in the correction system, building a reputation as one of the toughest and most effective wardens in the Midwest. At Eastmont State Penitentiary, she ran a tight ship. No corruption, no smuggling, no second chances for rule breakers. Co-workers saw her as exacting, efficient, and incorruptible. The kind of leader who never raised her voice because she didn't need to. She had this calm authority about her, imposing but quiet. At home, Camille's life was different. She had been married to Greg Drayton for almost 18 years. Greg was a former steel worker who transitioned into equipment installation for rural construction companies. A good man, loyal, but unambitious. Their son, Luke, was 16, a smart, serious kid who dreamed of becoming a pilot. Camille's house was clean and quiet, her schedule meticulous. To outsiders, she seemed like a woman who had it all. But privately, Camille was beginning to feel empty. Marriage to Greg had once felt comforting, simple, safe. But over the years, it became stagnant. They barely spoke outside of logistics, bills, groceries, Luke's school activities. Greg spent more time working in distant counties or out fishing with friends in a home. He didn't ask about Camille's job anymore. Didn't really listen when she talked. He had grown comfortable. She had grown restless. And there was something else, something Camille didn't talk about. Power had become addictive. Being the one in charge inside the prison made her feel seen, important, respected. But the moment she stepped out of those prison gates at night, that respect vanished. At home, she felt invisible. That quiet dissatisfaction created the perfect opening. An opening for someone like Deshaun Rivers. Deshaun Rivers entered Eastmont State in 2020. He was 36, convicted of armed robbery and attempted manslaughter in Louisiana. He had served just over 10 years and had become something of a legal shark behind bars, helping other inmates file complaints, appeals, and court motions. Unlike most inmates, Rivers wasn't bitter or aggressive. He was calm, curious. He used politeness like a scalpel, cutting through tension with grace. His voice was soft and deliberate. His letters, even when combative, were articulate and restrained. And he was observant. He noticed everything, the routines, the weaknesses, the patterns. So he filed a handwritten grievance about religious discrimination. He made sure it landed directly on Warden Drayton's desk, not because he thought it would succeed, but because he'd read her. He knew how to start a conversation. Camille's assistant flagged Rivers' letter. It wasn't angry or erratic like the others. It was thoughtful, strategic, She decided to meet with him briefly, expecting a quick clarification and dismissal. But the moment they spoke, something shifted. Rivers didn't talk like most inmates. He asked her questions about prison policy, rehabilitation metrics, and reform philosophy. He listened and then responded with surprisingly nuanced ideas. He didn't flatter her. He challenged her. Camille walked out of that meeting intrigued, unsettled. The next few weeks brought more letters. This time, Rivers suggested a peer mentorship program, a library improvement project, a proposal to reduce solitary confinement time for nonviolent infractions. Camille approved the first two. It felt logical, ethical, progressive, even, but her staff noticed a shift. Lieutenant Hernandez, a no-nonsense guard, quietly remarked, "Rivers gets more time with the warden than anyone on staff." Camille dismissed it as gossip, but she also didn't stop the meetings. They became weekly, then bi-weekly, then private. She started staying after hours, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. For the first time in years, she felt seen, heard, valued. One night, Rivers said something she would never forget. "You look tired, Warden. You carry the weight of too many people who wouldn't carry a thing for you." It hit her hard, not because it was false, but because it was true. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not her husband, not her co-workers, certainly not her son. She didn't reply. She just sat there, and Rivers leaned forward and said, "If you were on the other side of that desk, I'd still follow you, just so you know." Camille began making quiet changes. She reassigned officers who questioned her time with Rivers. She signed off on privileges for his block, new books, better food rotation, more rec time. Rivers never asked her directly. He never had to. She was doing it for him. And at home, her marriage was rapidly falling apart. Greg began coming home late, without explanation. Camille started sleeping in the guest room. When she checked her shared bank account one night and saw that Greg had withdrawn $6,000 for a business investment she knew nothing about, she didn't even argue. She didn't care, because all her energy was focused on one man, and he wasn't her husband. By late summer, Camille's routine had transformed. 3 nights a week, she stayed late under the guise of paperwork. But most of that time was spent either speaking to Rivers or reading the letters he continued to write her, now folded discreetly and passed via inmate clerks. Letters that spoke of loyalty, understanding, dreams, escape. They were romantic, but never explicit, hopeful, but never desperate. Each one chipped away at her defenses just a little more. Camille didn't see herself as crossing a line. Not yet. She believed she was helping him. And more than that, she believed she needed him. One Saturday, Greg came home reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, something he hadn't done since their early 20s. Luke, their son, had just returned from football practice and tried to keep out of the way, but the tension boiled over during dinner. Greg muttered something about your fake job and your fantasy morals. Camille snapped. She stood, slammed her glass on the table, and screamed, "At least someone at work respects me." Greg's face twisted. "That inmate, huh? I've seen the damn letters." Silence. Luke looked between them in horror. Camille turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind her. It was the last time the three of them ever sat at a table together. Within weeks, Camille applied to move Luke into her sister's custody for educational reasons. The truth? She couldn't risk her unraveling personal life, drawing more eyes into her professional world. Luke was smart, too smart. He asked questions. He watched her. He knew something was off. Greg didn't fight the decision. He barely spoke to her at all after that night. Camille, meanwhile, doubled down on her relationship with Rivers. She began reviewing parole board policies. She reached out to connections in the State Department of Corrections. She asked questions she never would have dared ask 5 years ago. What are the conditions for early transitional release? What if a housing sponsor is available? What happens if the inmate has completed education programs and is considered low risk? Step by step, she laid the groundwork for a miracle, and she was fully convinced it would work. That fall, Camille started keeping a private folder labeled Sundown Project. Inside, a savings plan, a house listing near the Oregon coast, a new identity packet, names, bios, even a mock wedding invitation with the names C. Daniels and D. Rivers. She imagined leaving Nebraska, resigning quietly, starting over. She pictured long drives, coffee by the ocean, a fresh life with the one man who, in her mind, truly understood her. But there was one obstacle. Greg. The idea didn't arrive suddenly. It came in fragments. First, Camille began researching fatal car accidents. She studied brake failures, gas leaks, tire sabotage. She bookmarked case studies involving mechanical failure with inconclusive forensic evidence. Second, she watched Greg's routine. When he left, what roads he used, where he parked his truck. Third, she tested his truck herself one afternoon under the pretense of moving it. She loosened the brake line slightly. Just a test. The next morning, he mentioned his brakes felt a little weird. She feigned concern, then scheduled a dinner to talk about things the following week. There would be no dinner. It was a gray Monday. Greg left before sunrise. Just like always, his truck made it 10 miles down a rural county highway before the brakes gave out completely on a sharp turn. He hit a guardrail at 53 miles per hour, flipped into a dry ditch, and was pinned inside as the engine caught fire. By the time paramedics arrived, he was already gone. Camille got the call at 6:47 a.m. She screamed. She collapsed. She did everything a grieving wife was supposed to do. At the funeral, she wore black and read a eulogy about loyalty in time. She cried on cue. She shook hands, smiled for sympathy photos, and said all the right things. Inside, she felt nothing but relief. Just 2 weeks after the funeral, Camille submitted her resignation. The public assumed she was taking time to grieve. In truth, she was accelerating her plan. She filed paperwork through an attorney friend, under a pseudonym, to act as a transitional housing sponsor for a rehabilitated ex-inmate. She gathered letters of recommendation from former colleagues, edited by her own hand. Finally, she requested a special early parole review for Deshaun Rivers, citing low-risk behavior record, completion of multiple rehabilitation programs, supportive reentry structure with housing and employment offers. It was bold. It was against the grain. But Camille's name still held weight. On May 4th, 2023, Deshaun Rivers walked free. Camille picked him up herself. He wore a borrowed coat and smiled like a man who knew he'd won. She kissed him on the cheek as they drove to her hidden property, 40 miles west of Lincoln. The house was modest. 2 bedrooms, a garden out back, a security gate. At first, the arrangement was blissful. They cooked, laughed, talked about the past. Rivers spoke about wanting to write a memoir. start a nonprofit for felons. Camille started writing job applications for him under a new name, Derek Wallace. She thought she had it all. But the first red flag came on day 9. She found her laptop open, bank accounts accessed, $3,000 withdrawn. When she asked, Rivers said he was looking into business ventures. She let it go, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Within weeks, Rivers' behavior shifted. He stopped sleeping in the same room. He kept his phone locked, whispering in the hallway. Packages began arriving. Strange items Camille hadn't ordered. Burner phones, SIM cards, duffel bags. She found out he'd created a dating profile under a false name. When she confronted him, he laughed and said, "Don't get attached, Cam. I'm not yours. Never was." The words crushed her, but what followed was worse. That night, she woke to find Rivers gone, her car missing. He came back the next morning, smelling like alcohol and perfume. And when she demanded the truth, he shoved her into the kitchen counter and said, "You think because you freed me you own me. You don't own SH*T. Camille called the police, then hung up before they answered. She wasn't ready to lose him. Not yet. Camille tried to reset the situation. She cooked elaborate dinners, offered cash for business ideas. She even suggested a weekend trip to the coast, one they had fantasized about in his letters. Rivers brushed her off. He now spent hours locked in the guest room, texting someone named Tamara. Camille finally checked his discarded phone. Messages revealed explicit conversations, video calls, and travel plans. He was using her. Worse, he mocked her. Texted Tamara Reed. "The old lady still thinks I'm in love. She'll pay for the move, then I'm out." Imagine falling for your own inmate. That's some Lifetime movie SHD. Asterisk. Camille's hands trembled as she read. She had sabotaged her life for this. The isolated property made Camille feel safer, until the neighbors began noticing. One reported shouting on multiple nights. Another claimed to see Rivers throw a bottle at the front door. On June 12th, deputies responded to a domestic dispute call. Camille opened the door, eyes red, a bruise forming on her cheek. She insisted it was an accident, that she'd slipped while cooking. The officers looked at Rivers, who stood calmly behind her, arms crossed, smiling faintly. They left without filing charges. That night, Rivers said, "You call them again and I'll tell them everything. About Greg, about your plan, about me." Camille didn't sleep. Unbeknownst to Camille, a private ethics probe had reopened at the Department of Corrections. Her fast-track parole sponsorship of Rivers had raised red flags. Financial records were subpoenaed. A retired staffer named Hernandez had given a quiet tip. Check the warden's call logs from 2022. They found dozens of recorded prison calls, unauthorized and intimate. Then came the letters, the signatures, the tampered parole recommendations. State investigators started building a quiet, slow case. And Rivers? He knew. He was talking to someone, likely a deal maker on the outside. He'd become the very threat Camille had once protected herself against. And now, he had every piece of leverage she'd handed him willingly. July 2nd, Camille woke to find her safe open. Gone $18,000 in emergency funds. Greg's life insurance check. Her unregistered 9mm Glock, purchased illegally the year before. Rivers wasn't home. The guest room had been stripped bare. She called his phone. No answer. Then she received a text. "Don't wait up. I've got better places to be. Thanks for everything, Camille. You were fun while it lasted. Something inside her broke. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She made a pot of coffee, sat quietly, and waited. At 12:39 a.m., headlights filled the gravel drive. Rivers stumbled in, drunk, laughing, wearing someone else's lipstick on his collar. Camille stood in the dark kitchen. She asked one question. "Are you going to kill me, Deshaun?" He paused, then chuckled. "You're not worth a bullet." She raised a knife. It wasn't rage. It was release. The blade entered beneath his ribs. He staggered, eyes wide, surprised. Camille struck again, once in the shoulder, once in the throat. Blood splattered the counter. He collapsed to the tile floor, gasping. She stood over him, shaking, the knife falling from her hand. And then she dialed 911. "I just stabbed an intruder," she said. "He attacked me. I had no choice." She said it again and again. Deputies arrived within minutes. Rivers was pronounced dead at the scene. Camille was handcuffed, placed in the back of a cruiser. She didn't resist, didn't cry. At the station, she remained silent for 3 hours. Then finally, she spoke. "It wasn't just self-defense. I lied to everyone. I freed him. I killed my husband." Investigators listened, expressionless. They already knew. They had her emails, the paper trail, the surveillance footage from prison, the doctor parole file. Camille had walked into their trap, thinking she was confessing before they found out. But they were already a step ahead. News broke the next morning. Former Nebraska warden arrested for conspiracy and murder. Paroled inmate found dead. Woman claims intruder. Secret romance ends in bloodshed. The story went national within 48 hours. Networks flooded Eastmont. Pundits dissected Camille's career, her marriage, her motivations. She became a symbol for corruption, for failure, for human vulnerability. True crime forums dubbed her the Warden Widow. Some painted her as a manipulative monster. Others, especially women, called her a victim of grooming and coercion. But none of it changed the fact. She had crossed every line. Camille faced 5 felony charges. Second-degree murder of Greg. Conspiracy to commit parole fraud. Abuse of public office. Evidence tampering. Voluntary manslaughter, Rivers. Her legal team argued she had been manipulated and psychologically abused, that she'd been seduced into compromising positions by a career inmate trained in emotional warfare. Prosecutors brought forward her letters, her digital calendar, and a chilling voice recording of Camille promising Rivers, "We'll be together no matter what. I'll make it happen." The jury deliberated for 3 days. She was found guilty on all counts. Red circle, red circle. On October 9th, the courtroom was packed. News crews waited outside. Greg's brother, Camille's former colleagues, and even Rivers' distant relatives filled the rows. Camille wore a gray suit, her hair pulled back, expression unreadable. The judge called her a cautionary tale of unchecked power and personal delusion. He condemned her for betraying the public trust, manipulating the justice system, and orchestrating a murder under the illusion of love. Then came the sentence. 35 years. Federal custody. No parole. No early release. Camille showed no reaction. She simply nodded and whispered, "Okay." As she was led away in shackles, her son Luke, now living with Camille's sister, refused to look at her. The aftermath was seismic. The Nebraska Department of Corrections launched a full-scale internal review. 8 staff members resigned. 2 assistant wardens were reassigned. 3 parole board members were removed. Eastmont State was placed under new leadership. New security protocols were implemented, including restrictions on unsupervised contact between wardens and high-risk inmates. And the state passed the Drayton Provision, a new law mandating psychological evaluations for all correctional leadership personnel every 2 years. In the eyes of the public, Camille's name became synonymous with betrayal. True crime shows reenacted her story. Podcasts debated whether she had been a victim or villain. Her mugshot became internet fodder. A meme caption, "Warden turned widow turned killer." Some argued she had suffered from untreated trauma. Others insisted she had always harbored a dark streak, camouflaged beneath ambition and discipline. But the truth was more complicated. Camille wasn't simply evil. She was fragile, deeply lonely, dangerously underestimated, and slowly corrupted by the very system she helped uphold. She was proof that even the keepers of justice are not immune to the gravity of human weakness. Camille now lives in a federal women's correctional facility in Kansas. She works in a library. She has no visitors, no parole reviews, no media interviews granted. She reads constantly, mostly historical fiction and psychology. She journals obsessively but does not share the entries. Her son, Luke, never visited. He changed his last name at 18. He now attends university in Colorado, studying criminal justice, not to follow in her footsteps, but to understand how people like her fall so far. Was she a cold-blooded killer who murdered her husband and manipulated the law to free a violent man? Or was she a broken woman who, under the illusion of control, made one catastrophic decision after another? In the end, perhaps Camille Drayton was both, a protector who turned predator, a leader undone by longing, a cautionary tale not just for those in power, but for anyone who believes they're too smart, too strong, or too disciplined to fall apart. Because obsession doesn't announce itself. It grows slowly, patiently, until it takes everything. Thank you for watching Mystery Crime Vaults. This case reminds us that danger doesn't always come from outside the system. Sometimes it grows within it. If stories like this intrigue you, revealing the twisted truths behind power, betrayal, and justice, be sure to like this video to support the channel. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Tell us in the comments, was Camille a villain, a victim, or something in between? Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep questioning the stories we think we know.